Welcome in to the Verts podcast. I'm Tyler Graves alongside Carter Bales.
This is episode 7, right? I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Tennessee is coming off a big win over the Kentucky Wildcats, 44-6 in Knoxville. And we are going to talk about that game here in a second. But first, we have some breaking news as we are recording this on a Tuesday night. Tennessee is now ranked number 1 in the country. The college football playoff rankings came out tonight, and Tennessee is ranked number 1. Number 2 is Ohio State, and then number 3 is Georgia. And those are pretty much the clear top 3 teams in the country to everyone right now.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. It doesn't feel real because as long as me and you have been alive and really been watching Tennessee football, we haven't really been that good. So seeing this, especially after where we were 2 years ago, winning 3 games in the SEC, it's crazy to see.
Yeah, we'll jump into this Kentucky game here, Carter. Kentucky scored their only points of the game in the first quarter.
On their second drive.
Yes, and after that it was pretty much all Tennessee. However, I will say Tennessee's offense did not have a perfect game.
No, they didn't. We had a few opportunities that we missed. I know we had Squirrel White open in the end zone, and he just missed the ball, let it go between his hands, and then we missed a few field goals too, I believe. So
yeah, but the defense played outstanding. Best game defensively of the year. Will Levis was held to 98 passing yards, and he was also picked off 3 times. What was his QBR, Carter?
16.4.
Oh.
NFL caliber quarterback.
Oh.
Number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, Will Levis.
That's not very good.
3 interceptions on 98 passing yards. Terrible. And you can, say he was banged up, but he made some very, very bad reads Saturday.
Yeah, he really had 3 interceptions, obviously, but he had 1 or 2 more that could have been picked off.
Yeah. So, bad game from him. Definitely hurt his draft stock. And then on the ground, really, they couldn't get anything going. Chris Rodriguez had 15 carries for 64 yards. He's been their workhorse since he's come back from his suspension.
How about D. Beckwith getting some carries in garbage time in the fourth quarter?
Yep, 3 carries for 13 yards. So that was overall, just in general, considering they had a bye week to prepare for Tennessee, it looked like they came out there and never played football before. It was embarrassing if you're a Wildcats fan.
To me, I won't say the MVP of this game because he didn't, but the guy that I was most surprised by in this game on the offensive side of the ball was Jalen Wright. That's who I would give the game ball to for offense, and then for defense, I would give it to Slaughter.
Yeah, Jalen Wright had a really good game. On the ground in general, Tennessee had a good game, but Jalen Wright, with the minimal carries he got, he only had 7 carries, and he had 5 less yards than Jabari Small. I mean, he was just breaking free and slicing up that Kentucky defense, which we had been told was one of the best defenses that we would face this year. So, I mean, they were giving up, 13 points per game or something like that before this on average?
They hadn't given up 24 points since, last year.
Since the Tennessee game last year.
Yes.
And we put up 27 in the first half. So should have been 28, but McGrath missed a field goal, or extra point, I should say. But overall, offensively, even with some of those missed plays, it was an outstanding performance.
Well, Tennessee's offensive line is, to me, it's fun to watch a team finally, because we've not had this in recent years. It's good to finally watch a team that has an offensive line that can just move people at will. And we've not had that in a very long time, probably since Fulmer was coaching the Vols.
Yeah, with Butch, we had very thin offensive linemen. They were slender and agile. With Pruitt, we had some big offensive linemen, but they were just big. I mean, that's about.
Will Friend was the O-line coach.
Yes, when Will Friend is not very good at his job. But with this coaching staff that Heupel brought in, it's night and day. Most of these guys were on that staff with Will Friend. They were on the roster with Will Friend as their coach. And just the massive leap that we've seen between this year and last year even is insane.
Yes, and the defensive line in this game. So all I heard about was, how bad Kentucky's offensive line is, and in the first quarter I was like, I'm not too sure that their O-line's that bad. Well, finally in the second half, I saw, okay, yeah, Kentucky's offensive line, they started to struggle there in the second half, and we ended up getting, I know we got 2 sacks in a row.
Yep, we had a total of 4 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss. And then
8 tackles,
obviously 3 interceptions.
8 tackles for a loss is pretty good.
4 QB hurries. Will Levis didn't really have a whole lot of time in the pocket, so I guess that could also be something that you can, say, well, he's banged up and didn't have a whole lot of time in the pocket. But still, as a NFL caliber quarterback, you should be able to do stuff, with the bad offensive line.
Well, I do want to mention this. So they hired a new offensive coordinator in the offseason. I'm pretty sure the guy's name last year was Eddie Gran. I think that was his name.
Sounds familiar.
The offense that they're running this year compared to last year, I mean, why in the world are they not running what they ran last year? Last year they could actually move the ball down the field.
No, they're limiting Will Levis's touches.
I felt like I was watching how many different formations can we run counter out of. That's what I felt like I was watching. And then in the I think it was the third quarter, when they're down, 27-6 or 30-6, the only thing they're doing is running counter and then throwing a screen.
Yeah,
that's all they're doing.
No, and then whenever they got down. It was actually kind of comical to watch. I do have to bring this up. The last 2 drives of the game for Kentucky, they weren't even trying to push the ball down.
Oh, no.
They were running the clock out.
That was
embarrassing. As if you're an SEC team and you have no confidence in your team to push it down the field, so you have to run the clock out to start the buses and go home, that is embarrassing. That is absolutely embarrassing. Tennessee did that to Kentucky Saturday night.
But, yeah, the offensive just – I won't even say the play calling, just that system. It is not anywhere near as good as it was last year.
It's an NFL system. Well, for most NFL teams, use your play clock. Use your play clock. You can't do that in college football. You can't. Everyone is fast paced.
Well, but I don't think it's really an NFL offense because, I mean, I saw more screens in this game Saturday than I ever wanted to see.
Yeah, no, it was. They did run a lot of screens.
They ran. I mean, there was one drive where I felt like they literally they'd get under center, they'd either hand the ball off or they'd throw a wide receiver screen over to the right side, and we'd tackle him for like a gain of 2, and it was like, what are y'all? What are y'all trying to accomplish?
What was their longest run? Their longest run came from Chris Rodriguez and McClain. It was tied for 16.
Well, the Rodriguez one was where that was on the drive that they scored.
Yes.
He got pushed out at the 1-yard line.
Yes. After that first drive, that scoring drive, I guess I should say, from Kentucky, they had one more drive where they were pushing it down the field, and then Slaughter had that massive
interception.
Intercepted. But it was just that was easily the best defensive performance we had seen all year from our guys. Hopefully we can carry that into this week.
Yep, and we're going to go ahead and take a break here. We will be back with our SEC Talk segment. You're listening to the Verts podcast. Welcome back to the Verts podcast. It is now time for our SEC Talk segment. And first we are going to talk about some coaching news as Brian Harsin has officially been fired from Auburn.
Yeah, I'd say everybody was expecting this. It got to a point where we thought it was going to happen at the end of the season, but Auburn decided to go ahead and pull the plug on the Harsin era.
Yeah, they hired a new athletic director. They hired John Cohen from Mississippi State. They hired him on, I think that deal was done Saturday night, which was a weird time.
Hey, I expected it too because Harsin was, I think I read somewhere, an hour and a half late to his post-game presser.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, I saw that on social media. Apparently, Brian Harsin was an hour and a half late to his post-game presser after their loss last week. So I figured news was coming, but I once again didn't really expect it to happen this week. But went ahead and did it. They're going to get an interim in there and maybe win a few football games before this season's over.
Well, let's talk about the hot board. So you've got a few names getting thrown around right now. Hugh Freeze is one of them.
Lane Kiffin, of course.
Lane Kiffin. Deion Sanders is getting mentioned.
Mark Stoops.
Urban Meyer has been mentioned. I don't think he would come back to college for that job.
No. Gary Patterson would be a good fit, I think, over there.
Well, here's the thing about, I won't say I'm not an Auburn fan, so I can't really say exactly who I think would be a perfect fit down there. But I do think I think the next head coach down there does need to, does need to have thick skin, because we've seen, especially with Brian Harsin, he was kind of doomed from the start.
They've been calling for his head since the beginning of the season.
Some of the boosters didn't really like him. There was this constant boosters versus athletic department vibe, and it was never going to work. So I think the next head coach at Auburn, I guess one, he needs to get along with everyone, and then two, he just needs to have thick skin and not let that stuff affect him.
Probably shouldn't cheat on his wife either. I think that'd be a big one since Harsin decided to do that over the offseason.
And speaking of Auburn, we'll go ahead and talk about the Arkansas game. So they played Arkansas at noon on Saturday, and they lost 41-27 to the Razorbacks. KJ Jefferson had a pretty good game, especially on the ground. He had, let's see, how many yards did he have, Carter?
10 carries for 45 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns on the ground.
Yes,
so
he had two rushing touchdowns.
That's what matters.
He had 234 through the air.
Yeah, Auburn looked pretty good through the air. On the ground, they had 183 yards, but they just couldn't cap it off with enough touchdowns, as Arkansas had 4 on the ground and 1 through the air. So really dominant ground game for the Razorbacks.
I did watch some of this game. It was Auburn actually. They hung with them for most of the game.
Yeah, no, it was 13-17 at halftime, and then after that, Arkansas just kind of took over, scored 14, and then 10 in the third and fourth quarters. Auburn went scoreless in the third quarter, and then 14 in the fourth quarter, but too little, too late.
Next game we'll discuss is Missouri and South Carolina. So I predicted this one. I didn't think it would be 23-10, but I did predict a Missouri W last week. So I got one on you.
You did get one on me there, yeah. South Carolina just can't win when they need to, can they? I mean, a game that they really should have won or picked to win. What was the spread for this game? It wasn't very high.
I don't remember, but South Carolina was favored.
They were favored. And then, of course, like I said, I believe I said that Spencer Rattler was going to have a bad game, but the South Carolina ground game was going to get it going. Was not the case. They had 32 yards on the ground, 171 through the air, but Spencer Rattler still can't throw a touchdown, as he threw another interception. So... but Brady Cook looked really good, really all game. He ran the ball effectively for Missouri, along with Cody Schrader, their running back. So, really good team win for the Tigers.
And I think I saw this on Twitter. I think Eli Drinkwitz is now 3-0 against South Carolina.
Yeah. South Carolina, in the past has had Tennessee's number. Missouri's never really struggled against South Carolina. They've played South Carolina pretty well the entire time they've been in the SEC.
All right, we're going to move ahead to Florida, Georgia. This game was this was a blowout at halftime. It was 28-3, and then Florida kind of made a comeback in the third quarter. Carter, you said Georgia started trying to go
tempo.
Go with tempo.
Yeah, that's what I saw. It wasn't necessarily hurry up, but they started huddling less. They went a little faster, getting the plays in, trying to push the ball downfield, and they struggled a little bit. I guess maybe they were up so much they were trying to prepare for Tennessee, get something in, but because I expect them to try and at least start with tempo. But no, it ended up Florida scored 17 in the third quarter, was unable to score in the fourth. Final score ended up being 42-20. So Georgia, wins pretty convincingly. But that game was close for a little bit.
Dejon Edwards had another impressive game for Georgia. He rushed for over 100 yards. Stetson Bennett threw 2 picks, but he also had 2 passing touchdowns. Anthony Richardson had 1 passing touchdown, and he had 271 passing yards. 19 on the ground for Richardson. So looks like Georgia did do a decent job of containing him, because Richardson, if you let him outside the pocket, he can beat you with his legs.
Yeah, and I think Florida's problem, and I've been saying this all year, Florida needs to have more designed runs for Anthony Richardson, and they just don't. Most of his scrambling yards are on breakdown plays where he gets out of the pocket and tries to run for a few yards. So until they decide to start running him more, he will not be an effective quarterback because he has accuracy issues.
All right, let's go ahead and look at let's do Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Ole Miss wins 31-28 in College Station, and Texas A&M still only has 1 SEC win on the year.
Yeah, but they're young. I will say this. I bash A&M a lot. I bash Jimbo Fisher a lot. I think they might have finally found their quarterback in Carter Wigman. He looked pretty good. Had 4 passing touchdowns and had 338 yards through the air. So that's really good numbers. An 80.8 QBR. Jackson Dart 13 for 20 with 140. So their ground game once again dominates for Ole Miss, as they're pretty one-dimensional this year. But A&M might have found their guy in Wigman.
Yeah, Judkins for Ole Miss. He had 34 carries for 205 yards and a touchdown. He is a true freshman. He only turned, I think he turned 19 like last week or something, or very recently.
Yeah, he's good. He's really good.
He's going to be a heck of a player. And
if Lane Kiffin ends up leaving, he'll leave with him.
Yeah, Zach Evans really, he almost has gotten his job taken from him, I think, because how do you not start a guy after that kind of performance?
Yeah. They only had 1 touchdown on the ground. Dart threw 3 passing touchdowns, but that ground game definitely got them into scoring position. It's crazy to watch.
Devon Ajane for A&M, he had another good game. He had 138 on the ground, so a solid day for him. He's a good back. If Texas A&M did not have Devon Achane this year, you think they're bad now, they would be borderline unwatchable.
Yeah, they just really need to get some better play calling in there, but that'll never happen with Jimbo Fisher.
All right, I think that is it for our SEC games.
It is. We had a few teams on a bye week, Alabama and LSU both on a bye week, and so yeah, short SEC slate last week.
Yep, and we're going to go ahead and talk about this week's games now. I'll start off with, let's do Auburn at Mississippi State. Auburn just stole Mississippi State's athletic director from them. Will they steal a win from them?
No, sir. Mississippi State's going to go out there. Will Rogers is going to throw the ball around, do pretty good. Give me Mississippi State.
I expect Mississippi State to inflict some pain on Auburn this weekend. I'm going to go with Mississippi State as well. Give me the Bulldogs big. All right, next game we're going to talk about is Florida at Texas A&M. You know, before the year, this looked like it was going to be a pretty good game.
Yeah, top 25, maybe top 15 matchup even. But no, not the case, as both teams have really struggled this year. A&M has lost 2 in a row now, I believe. Florida has also lost 2 in a row, haven't they? Did they play LSU 2 weeks ago?
Florida, I know.
They lost last week.
Right,
I think they lost to LSU the week before. So both teams, I think, on two losses in a row. Yep, LSU, Georgia, and then South Carolina.
A&M's lost the last 4.
A&M has lost the last 4. So they're due for a win. I think Wigman's going to go out there and play a good game, and they're at home. So give me the Aggies in College Station.
I will go with Florida in this game, so I'm taking the underdog. I think Florida is going to get the win and improve to 5-4. Although, what does scare me about picking Florida is the fact that, you know, Wigman, he did have a very good game last week, and I could see him torching Florida's defense because they're not. Florida's defense isn't bad, but it's not good. It's certainly not good. So,
and the spread's only 3.5 at home.
Yeah. All right. So you've got. Oh, I wrote down Florida on yours. That wouldn't be good. All right, Florida for me, A&M for you. Next game. Let's talk about. Okay, we'll talk about this really fast. Liberty at Arkansas. Only thing interesting about this is that Hugh Freeze coaches the Liberty Flames, and Arkansas did struggle earlier this year with, I think it was Missouri State.
Yes.
It was. That's where Petrino coaches.
Yep. So, give me Arkansas to win this game. It's just it's Arkansas.
The spread is only 13.5, which is interesting. I would stay away from the spread because I could see this being a close game. I'll go with Arkansas, though, to win outright. I don't think there's any way that Arkansas will lose at home in this game. Next game, Kentucky at Missouri. Kentucky is favored by 2 points, even though they are coming off a huge loss to the Volunteers.
Yep, bounce back game. I think Kentucky ends up winning this, and they'll cover the spread.
I do not think that Kentucky is going to win this game. I think last week you kind of saw them get exposed against Tennessee.
And Drinkwitz does, execute on exposed weaknesses.
I think that Missouri is going to get the win here. I'm just kind of banking on the fact that Kentucky got exposed last week and their season's kind of going to go downhill from here. That's what I'm betting on.
I mean, they really have nothing to play for anymore. They came into the season with SEC championship contentions.
Give me the Tigers at home. And by the way, these two programs are very, very similar right now.
Yep.
All right, next game. South Carolina at the mighty Vanderbilt Commodores in Nashville. So this is kind of, I think we can officially call this the battle of the SEC East bottom feeder, so the SEC least?
Yes, I think you can easily say that. South Carolina has been disappointing this year, even though they were ranked in the top 25. South Carolina's been disappointing. You know what? Why not? Vanderbilt gets their first conference win in 2 years, 3 years?
Oh my goodness. Actually, it would be since 2019.
19. So, long time. Vanderbilt gets their first win, big program builder, quote-unquote builder. I'm using air quotes here for people who can't see me. So, yeah. Give me Vanderbilt. Why not? I don't like Spencer Rattler or Shane Beamer.
Well, I'm going to go with South Carolina here mainly because I think Shane Bieber treats every game, no matter who the opponent is, like it is the Super Bowl. And so I think he will have his team ready to go against the 0-4 in SEC play Vanderbilt Commodores. Give me South Carolina. And then the last two games that we have, of course, we're not going to talk about Tennessee, Georgia. We'll save that for the very, very end of the podcast. So we really only have one game left. It's Alabama at LSU. By the way, LSU is now ranked 10th according to the college football playoff rankings. They're ranked 10th. Alabama is ranked 6th. This line is currently at 13.5 points, though, in favor of Alabama.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to say Alabama's gonna win this game, even with it being in Death Valley at night. So that'll add some tension. Give me the Tide. They've lost one game. They're not gonna lose another this year.
I'm picking Alabama. But what happens if they lose this game?
If they lose this game, they're out of the playoffs.
Well, no, I'm talking in like bigger picture. Like, what happens if they lose this game? I mean, LSU, year one, Brian Kelly, basically
tops the best coach in college football history.
Beats, and that would put them at 2 losses. I think that would start to
maybe be a power shift.
Yeah,
could very well be a power shift. As you saw it with Bear Bryant. When Bear Bryant started to get a little older, his teams weren't as sharp as they used to be.
That's what I'm saying.
You're starting to see that with Nick Saban.
Start to see a decline if they lose this game. Now, if they go out and win, like they probably will, 45-24.
Yeah,
that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't? What if LSU pull off the upset? You know?
This team without Bryce Young is an 8-4 team, 9-3 team. So I think the Bryce Young factor alone is what's gonna keep Alabama on top.
All right, so that does it for our SEC Talk segment. We're going to move right on in now to the ranking segment. Carter, the college football playoff rankings just came out an hour ago now. Tennessee is ranked number 1 in the country, followed by Ohio State, Georgia at 3, Clemson 4, Michigan 5. I thought they would be
fourth. They just have a better resume, and head to head, I think Michigan dominates Clemson. But we don't make money to do that. So what do we know?
Alabama is at 6, TCU 7, Oregon 8, USC 9, and LSU rounds out the top 10.
Yeah. After that, we've got Ole Miss at 11 with their one loss being to LSU. UCLA at 12. K-State, Kansas State at 13. Kansas State had a very big win against Oklahoma State last week. I figured they might have been a little higher. But nonetheless, Kansas State at 13. Utah at 14. Penn State at 15. Illinois at 16. North Carolina at 17. Oklahoma State at 18 following their loss to Kansas State. Tulane at 19, so a group of 5 team in the top 20. Interesting to see. Syracuse at 20, Wake Forest at 21. I wouldn't even have them in the top 25 after their loss to Louisville. NC State at 22, Oregon State at 23, Texas at 24, as Texas should be in the top 25, and UCF, thankfully, at 25th after their win against Cincinnati.
All right, I'll go ahead and read mine off. So, as everyone knows, I had Ohio State at 1 last week. I had Tennessee at 2. Finally, my mind was changed on Saturday night after I watched the Vols absolutely destroy Kentucky, just absolutely body bagged them like it was nothing, 44-6. And to me, that was when I realized, hey, I think this is actually the best team in the country. So I put them at 1, and I put Ohio State at 2. The reason I put Ohio State over Georgia is because I do think that Ohio State beating Penn State is kind of impressive. I wouldn't say it's an A-plus win by any means, but I mean, if Tennessee, for example, went into Penn State and won, what was it, 44-31, we'd be talking about, okay, that's a good win. I mean, we would say that's a good win to go into Penn State, packed, sold out.
For any team to go into Penn State and win at Penn State, that's a good win. Yes.
So I do have Ohio State at 2. I think their offense is really, really good. They have some elite playmakers on the outside, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, who did not play against Penn State. There's a couple of other guys that, I can't name off the top of my head. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. Egwugu or something like that.
Close.
Yeah.
Close.
And then, of course, at the helm is C.J. Stroud. So anybody who is going to stop Ohio State this year is going to be in for a tall task. I've got Georgia 3. I think we'll know more about them after this weekend because they really have not played a team the caliber of Tennessee. And like you were saying to me before we started the podcast, if Oregon played Georgia right now,
it
would be a much closer game.
Yes, Oregon is kicking on all cylinders right now. Bo Nix has really got that offense moving. So yeah, they're not going to score 3 points. They'll score a lot more than 3.
Yeah. I've got Michigan 4 because, and I'll just say, I think it's absolutely laughable that Michigan is behind Clemson in the playoff rankings. I think on a neutral field, I would favor Michigan by a touchdown against Clemson.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So obviously I've got Clemson 5, Alabama 6, TCU 7, Oregon at 8, UCLA 9, USC 10. I have Kansas State at 11. So I'm high on Kansas State, higher than most people. I've got Utah at 12, Illinois at 13. The reason I have Illinois at 13 is because I just I have to, give them some respect. I mean, they've only lost 1 game all year, and it was week 2 of the season. So I'm willing to put Illinois at 13 in my ranking. I've got LSU at 14. So I'm not as high as the playoff committee, but I do have them at 14 inside my top 15. And then I've got Ole Miss rounding out my top 15 as they still only have 1 loss on the year.
All right, I'll go ahead and do mine now. I've had Tennessee at number 1 for, I want to say, 3 weeks now, and that's obviously not going to change this week. Tennessee is the best team in college football right now. Number 2, I've got Ohio State. I agree with you, Tyler. I believe Ohio State has one of the better offenses in the country. They've got the best receiving core in the country. C.J. Stroud is a beast. But head-to-head right now, I'd put Tennessee fans travel well. So if they were to play each other on a neutral field, I would say Tennessee wins that game. Number 3, I've got Georgia. Georgia struggled a few games this year. And they really haven't had a legitimate test when it comes to ranked teams to test. The only ranked team they've played all year, actually, up until this coming up week, is Oregon. And they blew out Oregon, but Oregon wasn't clicking on all cylinders. So I think that would be a different game if they played right now. Michigan at 4. I believe Michigan is better than Clemson. I've actually got Clemson at 6 on mine. Alabama at 5. I believe Alabama's still pretty good.
And I'll say this about Michigan. That Ohio State-Michigan game is shaping up to be a great game at the end of the year.
Yes, and I'm going to be honest. Whatever team loses that game will not be in the college football playoff. I believe there is a little bit of SEC bias when it comes to SEC schools.
Yes, whoever loses the Tennessee-Georgia game Saturday still has a chance, but
yes.
Whoever loses the Ohio State-Michigan game, in my opinion, doesn't really have a chance.
No, and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
SEC football reigns supreme. At number 7, I've got TCU. They've played really well all year, have 4 ranked wins, but I don't have them as good as Clemson and Alabama and Michigan, Ohio State, Tennessee. Number 8, I've got Oregon. Like I said, they're clicking on all cylinders. Bo Nix really has things going for that offense. They're going to continue to win games, and they might end up sneaking their way back in. Who knows? Number 9, I've got USC. They've looked pretty good all year. Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley are a pretty good duo over there. Quarterback, head coach. So Kansas State is at 10 on mine. I'm also really high on Kansas State. That dominating win against Oklahoma State. Did Oklahoma State score?
No, game? It was 48-0.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy for a team that's good.
My dad said, he was like, Oklahoma State, they do this every year. They have a game where they just don't show up.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
And it's not because they're going to overlook a team. Kansas State's a good football team. They shouldn't overlook Kansas State. But I've got Kansas State at 10 on mine. UCLA at 11. Chip Kelly's done a pretty good job over there. Utah at 12. Ole Miss at 13. So they moved up from 15 to 13 on mine following that win against Texas A&M. LSU at 14. So I think me and you have the same there.
Yes.
Not as high on LSU as the college football playoff rankings are. And then I've got Illinois at 15 because Illinois is 7-1 with one loss earlier in the season, like we mentioned, like you mentioned, I guess I should say earlier. But their strength of schedule really isn't all that, so I've got them at 15. So that rounds out my 1 through 15.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back with our pick segment for the non-SEC games. You're listening to the Verts podcast. Welcome back to the Verts podcast. It is now time for our pick segment. Carter, we're going to start off with Baylor at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is favored by 3.5 points. This game is, this game is on ESPN Plus at 3 o'clock.
This is an ESPN Plus game.
Never would have guessed that at the beginning of the year.
No, both teams 5-3. Baylor 3-2 in the conference. Oklahoma 2-3.
I'm kind of surprised this is on ESPN. I mean,
I'm still surprised.
I'm very surprised.
Even with both these teams struggling compared to what they thought they were going to do.
They're both unranked, yes. But they're both they're
both one win away from being bowl eligible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Give me the Baylor Bears here. Oklahoma, I'm not confident on what they can do offensively. And defensively, they haven't looked great all year. So give me Baylor.
I'll go with Oklahoma here. So I'm going to go with the group of former Vols, all three of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Oklahoma at home. So we do not agree there. Next game is Syracuse at Pitt. Pitt is actually favored in this game by 3.5 points, even though they're unranked and Syracuse is ranked 20th.
Yeah, Syracuse coming off of a loss. Both teams really coming off of a loss. 42-24 the Pitt game, 41-24 the Notre Dame game. You know what? I'm gonna go with Syracuse to win this game. They're gonna come with a bit of a bounce back against Pittsburgh as they lost to Notre Dame, who is really not good. So yeah, give me the Syracuse Orange over the Panthers.
I'm going with Syracuse. I don't like this line a whole lot, so no. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go with Syracuse. I just think they're a better team than Pitt overall.
Yes, Pitt has really gone downhill since the beginning of this season.
All right, next game we'll do is Texas at Kansas State. Let's see. Kansas State is a 2.5 point underdog at home. Very interesting line here.
Yeah, Longhorns with Quentin Ewers have been pretty good this year. They're definitely a lot better with him at the helm than they are their backup. But I like Kansas State. They've played really well all year. Had a big win last week, and I don't think they're going to sleep on the Longhorns. So give me the Wildcats.
I can't really figure Texas out. I feel like every time I figure them out, they prove me wrong the next week. So I'm going to go with Kansas State here, which means Texas is probably going to win by double digits. But
that's been me with Notre Dame all year. I pick against Notre Dame and they win. So,
speaking of Notre Dame, let's go to Clemson at Notre Dame. This game is a night game in South Bend. Clemson is only favored by 3.5 points.
Yeah, the night game is something else in South Bend. But I just that Clemson defense is good, and they're starting to click offensively. I'm not even going to try and say their quarterback's last name.
DJ Uiagalelei.
I'll say DJ. DJ has looked really good this year compared to last year, just in his numbers. So I'm gonna go with the Tigers to win this game in a close one, but give me Clemson.
Upset alert. I'm going with Notre Dame to beat Clemson, and that will probably knock them out of the playoff conversation, at least for now. Maybe they'll be back in it at the end of the year.
If they lose to a bad Notre Dame team, they're done.
They probably will be, but we never know. We never know.
Yeah. If Tennessee decides to crap the bed for the rest of the season and lose to South Carolina or something like that after Georgia, if we lose that game, they could very well be back in it.
All right, and then our last game before, of course, our Toilet Bowl segment is Wake Forest at NC State. Battle of two top 25 teams, although Wake is 21st and NC State is 22nd. NC State does not have their quarterback, Leary. He got hurt a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to go with Wake Forest here.
Yeah, Wake Forest coming off of a major upset against Louisville. I just don't see NC State doing anything without Leary, so give me Sam Hartman and the Demon Deacons.
And then now it is time for our Toilet Bowl. This week's Toilet Bowl takes place in none other than Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the, I guess you could say, historic Lincoln Financial Field, where the Eagles play. But this week we don't care about that. We only care because that's where the Temple Owls play. It's South Florida at Temple, baby. And it's a 3.5 point spread in favor of South Florida right now, who's 1-7. Temple's 2-6.
It's crazy to think that South Florida was in a game with the Gators earlier this year.
And almost won.
Yes, should have won, arguably. I like to take the underdog in these, so give me the underdog. The Temple Owls are going to win this game at home.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm going with South Florida just because of what you said. They were in a game with Florida.
Hey, Temple's going to be bowl eligible by the end of this season.
Oh, look at that. Find tickets. Tickets as low as $10, guys. You can go to this game for $10 a pop.
Screw Tennessee, Georgia.
I'm
going to go watch the Owls.
Well, why would you go watch Tennessee, Florida when you can get 60 tickets at Temple, South Florida?
For the same price.
For the same price as one at Tennessee, Georgia.
Exactly.
All right, so that concludes our pick segment. We are going to take a quick break, and then we will be back with our final segment. It will be the Tennessee versus Georgia preview. You're listening to the Verts podcast. Welcome back to the Verts podcast. It is now time for our final segment. It's the Tennessee versus Georgia preview. And Tennessee is currently ranked number 1 according to the college football playoff rankings. Georgia is now ranked number 3 in the land.
Yeah, Georgia only allowing 10.5 points per game. I do not expect that to hold up against this very potent is a light way to put it, Tennessee offense. As we're averaging close to 50 points per game at 49.4. Went down a little bit. Arguably should have been up because we missed a touchdown opportunity. but nonetheless, 49.4. Georgia 41.8 points per game, but looking at the stat sheet, they don't really have a big touchdown getter other than Edwards, who has 7 touchdowns. But Stetson Bennett, he doesn't throw a whole lot of touchdowns.
Looking at this game from a strictly football standpoint for a second, I'll look at Georgia's offense as a whole for a second. So Stetson Bennett obviously is the quarterback. We all know about him. We all know his story. He was a walk-on, everything. Georgia won the Natty last year. He played good in the national championship, but
he struggled this year.
The questions around Stetson Bennett have always been, when Georgia needs that big play, can he deliver? Is he elite? And obviously Georgia's defense was so good last year that they kind of carried that entire team into the national championship, and then all Stetson Bennett had to do is make a couple of plays here and there late in the fourth quarter, and Georgia was able to get it done. This year, it's a similar situation, but the defense isn't as good, so they have to rely on their offense a lot more. To be honest, I was very worried about Georgia at the beginning of the year, especially after week 1, because they completely decimated Oregon. They did whatever they wanted to do against Oregon offensively. Georgia has 2 really good weapons at tight end, believe it or not. Their best weapons aren't wide receivers. They're tight ends. Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington.
Who is 6'7", 260 pounds. 2
absolute studs who can catch the ball and run with it and run people over, not to mention block. So, and then obviously Dejon Edwards, who I've mentioned I think twice now in this podcast. He is a very good running back. I would put him in the top 5 in the SEC for running backs. So that's just kind of a little preview of Georgia's offense. Obviously, they have, believe it or not, Ladd McConkey, I would say, is their best receiver, and he is consistent. He probably isn't going to beat you down the field a whole lot, but he will get 4 or 5 yards when you need to.
Yeah. Let's focus more towards Tennessee's defense, as they had one of the best games, or the best game they've had all year against the Kentucky Wildcats. And if they, in my honest opinion, if they have half of the game that they had against Kentucky, are able to force a turnover or two, get a few sacks on Stetson Bennett, who is playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the country, I think Tennessee's got a really good shot. If Tennessee's defense can get some stops when they need to, which they've done really all year. Allowing 393.6 yards per game, only 93 of those on the ground. So Tennessee's front 7 has been really good all year. They've got another really big test whenever they're going to be playing Dejon Edwards, though. 71 carries for 440 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. So he is a very, very good running back, as Tyler pointed out earlier. And then you have Brock Bowers through the air, who is a wide receiver in a tight end's body. He is a big dude. Had a ridiculous catch against Florida's secondary last week, Tyler. I don't know if you saw that. But Brock Bowers is really good. And then that other guy, what was his name? That other big old tight end they have.
Oh, they have Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington.
Washington, that's right. He's big-bodied receiver, can hurdle over defenders. So definitely some scary pieces on that Georgia offense. But are they going to be able to get the ball to him? That's the question. Stetson Bennett has struggled a little bit this year at times, particularly against Missouri, a team that they really weren't expecting to struggle against, maybe just looked over them. But Stetson Bennett has struggled. If Hendon Hooker is in this Georgia offense is going to be unstoppable. But luckily, he's with the Big Orange.
Let's transition now to the other matchup on the other side of the ball, Tennessee's offense versus Georgia's defense. So Georgia is without a key player for Saturday, and actually he's out for the rest of the year, is what they're saying. Nolan Smith, who is one of their best players on defense, probably their best player. He is a linebacker. He is out for the year, reportedly. Number 4.
They're also missing a safety, I believe, aren't they?
I'm not sure.
That was at least early on last week. That's what they were saying, with some sort of stress fracture in his foot.
Well, I know they have Christopher Smith back there, and Keely Ringo's a corner. Keely Ringo's he's a very solid corner.
A lot of Georgia fans online are saying that he's going to be locking up Jalen Hyatt. I don't know if that's possible.
No, I don't think anybody can lock Jalen Hyatt up, but their front seven, I'm going to be honest, I'm not real familiar with, just because
they lost
every single person from the front seven last year is gone.
Yeah.
They went to the NFL.
A lot of new faces over there in Sanford.
I can tell you, like, probably 4 or 5 players that were on last year's team. Well, I can. Quay Walker, Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, N'Kobe Dean. Let's see, who else was on that team? I don't think I can name anybody else off the front seven, but I can name those 4.
Yeah,
that's
all NFL draft picks.
Lewis Seen, he played in the secondary. He was a safety.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were loaded last year. They lost all those guys. Obviously, Georgia has recruited at an elite level, so they are able to replace those guys. But I guess we're going to figure out Saturday if we're going to find out if that's really the case, if they can replace those guys, or if they are going to have, struggles on defense. Because this is the first real offense that Georgia has faced all year.
Yeah, and Tennessee's offensive line, going back to Georgia's front seven, who is relatively new compared to what they had last year, Tennessee's offensive line has played really well, especially of late, but all season they've played really well. So I'm interested to see how well they match up against these 4- and 5-star talents that Georgia just seems to make in a cloning lab.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and give out my keys to the game for Tennessee. So, number 1, and I was kind of griping about this on Saturday because I was sitting in the stadium and I was like, why are we not running tempo? Why are we not? And then finally, in the third quarter, after we had stopped Kentucky for like the 11th time in the game, we finally went on a drive where we used tempo again, and we went right down the field and scored. So I was like, why are we not going faster, Because I'm used to us snapping the ball with 33 seconds on the play clock, and we were just kind of ticking it down and slowing it down. So number 1 on my keys for Tennessee is use tempo to your advantage. I've heard Kirby Smart talk about that a lot this week, Tennessee's tempo. He said you really can't prepare for it. You just got to hope that all that conditioning you did in the spring and summer pays off. So that's my number 1 key for Tennessee, is offensively use tempo to their advantage. Number 2, and they had a major problem with this last year, contain Stetson Bennett. He ran all over Tennessee's defense last year. That cannot happen Saturday. If that happens Saturday, Tennessee will lose. Tennessee has done a very good job this year, though, of containing quarterbacks. I don't think they've given up. I would venture to say they haven't given up more than 70 yards to an opposing quarterback. Anthony Richardson might be the most.
He was close. He had, I want to say, 60s. He was in the 60s with rushing yards.
Which is fine for him, because he's a really good runner. So that's my number 2 key for Tennessee. Number 3 is don't allow Georgia's tight ends to take over the game.
And that's a big one.
Washington and Brock Bowers, you cannot allow these guys to take over the game. When you're down in the red zone, you better believe Georgia's going to throw them the ball, and it's just going to come down to, can we make the play? Can
I throw the ball high enough for them to catch it and the defenders not have a chance?
Yeah. But they're good. They're huge. They're big red zone targets. They love to use Brock Bowers, especially in the red zone, because I know
that tight end around.
I know he's
in
big.
Particular.
Yeah, I know he's big, but
when he
gets the ball in his hands, he's more like a fullback.
Yeah.
So that's number 3, and then number 4 is when Hooker has to make a play. He's got to make it, and he's done this all year long. He's going to have the game of his life, I think, to pull this one off, because as great as the Alabama game was,
we missed opportunities.
And as good as we played, we did miss some opportunities. And I think Georgia's defense is better than Alabama's. So I do think that, we're going to have to play better. As crazy as it sounds, we scored 52 points against Alabama. I think we're going to have to play better offensively because Georgia's defense is better.
And that doesn't necessarily mean score more points.
It doesn't mean score more points.
No, it just means do not miss opportunities.
Correct. And convert.
Yes.
Convert when you have to convert. If it's 3rd and 6, you got to convert.
Let's talk about Tennessee's receiving core. Cedric Tillman was on a pitch count last week. Josh Heupel said in the post-game presser that he had been running 100% for 2 weeks before the Kentucky game, but they had him on a pitch count for Kentucky. So I expect him to be 100% playing the majority of the snaps this week. And that's really good for this Tennessee offense, because that gives you 2 guys you've really got to – 3, but 2 in particular that you've really got to worry about, and Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman.
Against Kentucky, Tennessee, they went to Tillman early.
Yes, getting him back in the game, and then you really didn't see him after that, and he wasn't on the field the entire second half.
Yes, so like you said, they had a pitch count on him, and they were only going to let him do a few things in that game, but they were going to limit him for the most part. I guess because they know that
they can beat Kentucky without.
Yeah. Yes, and this is such a big game.
Yeah. You can beat Kentucky without Cedric Tillman. You cannot beat Georgia without Cedric Tillman.
All right, it's prediction time. I'm going to go ahead and give my prediction. So, Battle of the Undefeateds here. So as everyone knows, I picked Tennessee to beat Alabama. And I just had a gut feeling that Tennessee was going to pull it off. I kind of had that feeling the whole time, the whole year. I've honestly not felt like that once about this game. I just think Georgia's defense is going to give Tennessee not a lot of problems, but just enough problems to pull it off. So I'm going to go with Georgia. As much as I hate to say it, hope I'm wrong, but I'm going to go with Georgia to beat Tennessee, give Tennessee their first loss of the year. I'll say Georgia wins 37-31. That's my score prediction.
All right, I'll do mine now. You might have not had this gut feeling at all when it comes to this game, but I have. This offense, guys, it is something that I have never seen. This offense is better than the 2019 LSU offense, which was ridiculous, I should add. I'm so confident in this offense, and I think the defense, moving Danico Slaughter to the corner position, was the best thing that they've done all year with this defense. He is a big asset as a corner.
Josh Heupel we forgot to mention this, Josh Heupel did mention multiple times this week that this will be the most healthy the secondary has been this year.
Yes. So I'm confident that this defense is going to be able to get some stops. If they make it to the red zone, not so much, because they've got those big tight ends in Washington and Bowers. But I think we're going to be able to hold them from the 50-yard line. This front seven is ridiculous. We've said it all year. Best front seven in the SEC. I think the offense is going to be clicking on all cylinders. Cedric Tillman's going to get the ball a lot. Jalen Hyatt is definitely going to get the ball a lot. Brew McCoy's going to make an impact. And Princeton Fant has came alive these past few games. He's making an argument to be an NFL fullback in the future. So I just have a feeling, guys. Give me the Vols in Sanford Stadium. I think the Vols are going to end up winning this game. I'm not quite sure on a score. I think Tennessee is going to get in the 40-point range. So give me Tennessee 45, Georgia 42.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Verts podcast. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. Hopefully we can continue to do this into, I guess, when the season ends. And then we'll hopefully pick it up again next year, as we're now only, we're in the final month of the college football regular season. So once again, I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll see y'all next week.